Jakarta's humid morning air clung to everything, from the marble floors of the corporate high-rises to the creases in Arya Setiawan's freshly pressed shirt. He stepped out of the taxi, slung his worn-out laptop bag over one shoulder, and looked up at the glass facade of the Pertamina head office. His heart thumped not with nerves, but with anticipation. Today marked the beginning of his placement at the Foreign Energy Integration Division, a department that managed high-level joint ventures with oil and gas companies from around the world. Arya wasn't anyone's cousin, son-in-law, or fraternity brother. His rise had come from late nights, unpaid internships, and a reputation for being maddeningly honest. In an environment where favors flowed like oil barrels, Arya insisted on being known for one thing only: hard work. Inside, the conference room buzzed with quiet murmurs as the morning briefing began. Most attendees were foreign engineers and analysts, tall, confident, sharp-suited men and women with sleek laptops and sleek accents. Arya took his seat in the corner, opened a notebook, and started jotting notes. He barely made eye contact, until the projector blinked and a new presenter stepped forward. She wore a tailored gray suit, her blonde hair tied neatly back, and she carried herself with the effortless authority of someone who'd done this 100 times. She turned to the whiteboard, drew the layout of a new gas distribution network, and introduced herself without looking up. Leah. Tel Aviv. Systems engineer. Arya's pen stopped moving. Her tone was cool and precise, her explanation clear. But her eyes, sharp, calculating, gave away a different layer. Arya wasn't sure if it was confidence or coldness. Whatever it was, it unnerved him and intrigued him. He found himself scribbling harder in his notebook, though nothing she said was beyond his understanding. He just wanted to look busy. When the presentation ended, and the group stood to disperse, Leah walked right past him, stopped, and pointed to his notebook. "Nice notes," she said, smirking slightly. Arya opened his mouth to respond but only managed a weak smile. She was gone before he could think of anything clever to say. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork and onboarding procedures. Arya kept his head down. Still, every time he spotted Leah in the corridor or by the vending machine, he felt something shift in the air. She wasn't friendly, not in the usual way. Just present. A glance. A nod. A soft hello at the water dispenser. Once, they ended up sharing a lunch table in the cafeteria. "You're the first Indonesian who's not afraid to talk to me," Leah said between sips of bitter office coffee. "Maybe because I don't know why I should be afraid," Arya replied, without flinching. She smiled. Good answer. That night Arya opened his old leather-bound diary and wrote a single sentence. "There's something about her I don't understand, and that's why I want to understand her more." 5 days in, they were assigned to work together, prepping data for a joint technical briefing. Their workroom was small, the kind with flickering lights and one working fan. The kind of space where conversations sneak in through long silences. They worked side by side from morning till midnight. At first, it was all business. Numbers. Pipelines. Deadlines. But gradually, between loading spreadsheets and compiling diagrams, small talk crept in. "I've worked in 10 countries," Leah said casually, opening a map on her laptop. "But Indonesia's different." "Different how?" "People here are too nice." "Too nice?" "Sometimes, kindness can be disarming." Arya chuckled. "Are you saying we're easy to fool?" Leah smirked but said nothing. She looked at him like she wanted to say yes, but couldn't. By the time their first week ended, Arya found himself waiting to bump into her. He tried not to show it. But his eyes followed her even when she wasn't looking. When the office lights went out during a rainstorm and only emergency LEDs glowed, they found themselves sitting in the hallway together, waiting for power to return. "Aren't you afraid of the dark?" she asked. "No," Arya said, staring at the red exit sign in the distance. "But I'm afraid of losing my way." Leah turned to him, slowly. Losing your way is more dangerous than the dark. He didn't know then, but she wasn't just making conversation. That night, back in her hotel room, Leah sat on the balcony with a tablet in her lap. Her fingers hovered over the screen as she accessed a secured application. Inside were multiple encrypted folders, but she only opened one. Target name, Arya Sediawan. Status, emotionally engaged. Her report was short. Subject is disciplined, honest, and shows no access to sensitive internal files. Emotional proximity working partially. Further observation needed. But when she closed the file, something didn't feel right. For the first time in her professional career, Leah felt uncomfortable about a mission. And she hated it. The next morning, Arya came early. The office was still dark, chairs still tucked in. But he was there, laptop open, notes scattered, coffee half drunk. He told himself it was just good discipline. But deep down, he knew. He wanted to see her. Just her. And when she walked in, holding 2 cups of cheap machine-made coffee, and wordlessly handed him one, he smiled like a schoolboy. You didn't eat breakfast, she said. Arya took the cup. Thanks. Didn't know spies could be so thoughtful. Leah stiffened. What did you say? Arya laughed. I meant engineers. But she didn't laugh back. In that instant, something passed between them. Something fragile. Something dangerous. And yet they both ignored it, pretending it was just the coffee talking. The week that followed was a quiet whirlwind. Quiet, because Arya barely said anything to anyone anymore, except Leah. And a whirlwind, because his feelings were spinning faster than his logic could keep up. He kept reminding himself, she's a colleague. That's it. But it wasn't just that. Not anymore. Arya and Leah were assigned to survey a local gas distribution facility on the outskirts of Jakarta. It was a field assignment, just the 2 of them, riding together in a government-issued sedan. The trip took almost 2 hours through Jakarta's endless traffic. Leah asked about food, local customs, the language, and Arya answered every question with his usual calm. But inside, he was on fire. She laughed when he described how Indonesians would say, Sudah makan? Have you eaten? Instead of hello. She raised an eyebrow when he explained the obsession with sambal. And when they finally stopped at a roadside stall after their survey, Leah insisted on trying smashed fried chicken. Ayam geprek. Spicy is good. She grinned. Arya warned her. Just 1 spoon of chili, okay? She added 5. 2 bites later, her face turned red, her lips trembled, and she nearly cried. Why do you do this to yourselves? Arya laughed, genuinely. Because the pain reminds us we're alive. Leah looked at him, eyes glistening. You're weird. You too. That moment, the simplicity of that laughter under a makeshift tarp roof, the honesty in their eyes, it cracked something open. A soft place either of them wanted to admit existed. That night Arya couldn't sleep. He lay on his thin mattress, staring at the fan spinning on the ceiling, replaying her laugh again and again. The way she said he was weird. The way she winced at the chili. The way her eyes softened when they met his. And somewhere in the distance, a little voice whispered, she's not just passing through. But that voice was naive. Because across the city, in a sleek hotel suite, Leah sat hunched over her digital tablet again. But this time, she hesitated before opening the report. The system login blinked. She typed slowly. Subject, Arya Sediawan. Progress, still no access to target files. Emotional link strengthened. Subject appears cooperative in all interpersonal interactions. Further trust building required. But when she was about to hit send, she stopped. She looked at Arya's photo on her tablet, the one she secretly took while he was laughing by the coffee stall. She zoomed in. His smile wasn't fake. And that's what made it hurt. The next day, Leah invited Arya to dinner. Not in the cafeteria. Not for work. But to a rooftop restaurant in a 5-star hotel overlooking the Jakarta skyline. The invitation was casual, almost careless. But Arya knew better. She was reaching out. He wore his best shirt, the only ironed one he had left, and arrived 10 minutes early. When Leah stepped onto the rooftop, she wore a white blouse, soft curls falling over her shoulder, and no makeup. Just her. Arya couldn't look away. During dinner, she told him stories about her childhood in Tel Aviv, her time in school, her love for languages. Most of it wasn't true. Carefully curated pieces of fiction crafted by intelligence officers over the years. But she delivered them so gently that even she began to believe them. And Arya? He listened like it was gospel. Halfway through dessert, she asked, "Do you believe love can grow in a short time?" Arya paused. "I don't know. But if someone makes us want to wake up earlier every day, maybe that's a sign." Leah looked at him, startled. "Sign of what?" "That it's not just admiration. That it's something more." She smiled. But her heart clenched. That night Arya walked her to the hotel lobby, his heart beating like it did when he was 17. They stood silently by the elevator. "I had a good time," she said. He nodded. "Me too." They didn't hug. Didn't kiss. Just stood there. Suspended in a moment that felt like it should have ended differently, but didn't. And when Arya returned to his small boarding house, he realized something terrifying. He was falling for her. Not as a coworker. Not as a foreign visitor. But as someone he genuinely, irrevocably wanted in his life. And he had no idea who she really was. Meanwhile, inside the intelligence servers buried under layers of encryption, these logs were being watched. Her supervisor in Tel Aviv had grown impatient. No access, no data, no movement. And worst of all, a growing suspicion. "Are you getting too involved?" he asked on a secure call. Leah didn't answer. Because she didn't know anymore. She wasn't pretending to smile around Arya. She wasn't faking her nervousness. And she wasn't sure if she could walk away without breaking something inside her. The next morning, Arya found a message on his phone. "Can we talk? Just you and me. No work." They met in the office's back garden, a quiet spot where the sound of cars was distant, and birdsong reigned. "I want to be honest about something," she said, sitting beside him on the stone bench. Arya looked at her carefully. "Okay. I don't usually get close to people. But with you, I feel safe. And that scares me." Arya nodded slowly. "I feel the same. But I'm not afraid." "Why?" "Because I'm not playing." Leah bit her lip. There was a long pause. "You don't know who I am," she whispered. Arya didn't flinch. "I don't. But I trust what I've seen." And then he said something that hit her like a bullet. "You're trying to protect something. But maybe you're the one who needs protecting." Leah looked away, blinking fast. She stood up. "I need to go." "I won't stop you," Arya said. "But if one day you want to talk, I'll listen." She walked away, her steps heavy. Behind her, Arya sat still, hands clenched. Because deep down, he already knew. She wasn't who she claimed to be. And still, he cared. 2 days passed with no sign of Leah. No messages. No hallway hellos. Not even a passing glance in the break room. Arya tried to convince himself it was nothing. That she was just busy. That maybe she was working on a different project. But the silence weighed heavily, like a storm waiting at the edge of the sky. Then, on Saturday morning, Arya got a call from the Pertamina security office. A casual check. "Your visitor ID, the one you registered 2 weeks ago from Ms. Leah, was used today. She came in early. Said she had a meeting." Arya frowned. "No meeting was scheduled." She walked around the second floor. Nothing major. Just odd. Arya's heart sank. A small voice whispered again, "This isn't just friendship." It never was. He texted Leah. "You were in the office today?" Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Yes. Just dropping by. Sorry if it seemed unusual." He didn't reply. That night, Arya sat in his boarding room with the lights off. Just the sound of traffic outside, and the low hum of the fan. He thought back, her curiosity about the IT room. Her innocent questions. Her overly polished answers. And how her eyes never flinched when they met his. She was too perfect. Too deliberate. Too controlled. The next day, Leah asked to meet. They met again in the back garden of the office. The same place where so much had been left unspoken. She sat down on the bench next to him. Arya didn't smile. "You're avoiding me," she said softly. "I'm just thinking." "About what?" He looked at her for a long moment. "About who you really are." Lee's smile faded. "Arya, I won't ask questions you won't answer," he interrupted. "But just tell me this, why me?" Leah looked down, then answered quietly. "Because you're the most honest person in this entire building. And that is the most dangerous kind of person for someone like me." Arya closed his eyes. Her words didn't shock him, they confirmed what he'd feared. "So," he said, "was it all fake?" Leah hesitated. "At first, yes." A pause. Then she continued, voice trembling slightly. "But something changed. I didn't mean for it to. I didn't plan to care. But I did. I do." Arya stood up, breathing slowly. "You broke something in me, Leah. Something that won't fix just because you feel guilty. I'm not here to fix anything," she said, standing up too. "I just wanted to be honest. At least once. Too late." Her eyes pleaded with him, but Arya had already turned and walked away. That night, Leah sat on her hotel balcony staring at the dark cityscape. She opened her encrypted laptop and typed her final report. Target maintains strict security compliance. No breach possible through social engineering. Emotional vulnerability identified. Subject likely aware of operation. Mission integrity compromised. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then, instead of sending the report, she deleted the draft. She'd failed. But not because she couldn't steal the data. She failed because she'd lost herself in the process. Meanwhile, Arya submitted his resignation. No fanfare. No dramatic exit. Just a quiet letter, neatly typed, and left on his supervisor's desk. The office accepted it. No one questioned him. But some whispered. And within days he vanished from Jakarta. No goodbyes. No forwarding address. No LinkedIn update. Just gone. He traveled to Kalimantan, an isolated regional post where he could work with his hands, away from servers and secrets. There were no skyscrapers there. Just trees, water pipes, and silence. Arya began to fade, not in memory, but in spirit. He no longer wore crisp shirts. No longer trimmed his hair. He stopped shaving. Stopped calling his friends. He answered emails with one-liners, and when he wasn't working, he sat by the river behind his small rented house, staring at the water for hours. One day, a local neighbor saw him feeding a stray cat. "You talk to that cat like a person," the man chuckled. Arya replied with a soft smile. "Because it's the only one who listens without lying." He didn't mean to sound bitter. But the truth tasted like rust. Back in Tel Aviv, Leah sat across from her superior, dressed in formal black and holding a blank file. "No actionable intelligence?" he asked. "Nothing," she replied. "No system breach?" "Not even close." He frowned. "You were there a month." She nodded. "It wasn't the system that was too strong. It was the person. He didn't press further. Just waved her away. She walked out of the room, holding her breath. But even after being dismissed, she didn't feel free. Her punishment wasn't demotion or reprimand. Her punishment was regret. 3 months later, Arya still lived in the same tenement near the river. Still worked odd jobs. Still stared into the distance like he was waiting for a sign that would never come. Until one afternoon, a stranger showed up. A young boy from the village ran to him with a letter. Someone sent this from Jakarta. Said it's important. Arya opened the envelope with a shaky hand. It was from Pertamina HQ. A formal invitation to a reunion for veteran staff. A polite gesture, perhaps. A PR stunt. But Arya didn't throw it away. He folded it, placed it under his pillow, and didn't say a word. That same week, Leah boarded a flight to Indonesia. Not as an agent. Not as a spy. Just as a person. She declined her next field assignment. Told her supervisor she needed time. Truth was, she needed closure. When she arrived in Kalimantan, she asked around. No one had heard of an Arya Setiawan. But a quiet old woman in the market pointed her to a man who feeds stray cats and never talks much. She followed the directions. And found him, thin, hunched, older-looking, sitting under a guava tree, watching the water flow. He didn't turn when she approached. But when she said, I was just passing through, he slowly looked up. It took him a few seconds. Then he whispered, Leah. They didn't hug. Didn't smile. She sat on the ground beside him. Not too close. Just enough to feel the same wind. I didn't come to apologize, she said quietly. I know it won't mean anything. He didn't answer. She pulled a letter from her pocket and placed it between them. That's all I have. If you want to read it, read it. If not, let the wind take it. Arya looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. What did you get from me? He asked finally. Lee's voice cracked. Nothing. Exactly, Arya said. And somehow, that answer made everything heavier. She left 2 hours later. No goodbye kiss. No second chances. Just silence and footsteps. And Arya, once again, watched the river, but this time, a tear rolled down his cheek. Not from anger, but from the cruel simplicity of a truth he had finally accepted. Even the most honest love can be built on a lie. The days after Lee's departure passed like dried leaves falling from a tree, slow, silent, and without ceremony. Arya didn't open her letter. He didn't burn it either. He simply slid it beneath a rock near the roots of the guava tree where they had sat, letting nature decide its worth. He wasn't trying to be dramatic. He was just tired, of meanings, of emotions, of expectations. The man who once arrived in Jakarta with ambition and purpose was now a shadow of himself, lost in a place where memories outnumbered hopes. His neighbors still saw him sweeping the yard, watering plants, helping elderly villagers fix broken roofs. But no one knew that at night, Arya would sit alone, staring into the darkness with no expression, as if he were watching something no one else could see. Sometimes, the wind would whisper, and he'd think of her voice. Other times, a bird would land near him, and he'd remember her laugh during that fiery lunch of ayam geprek. Memories don't knock before returning. And Arya had no defenses left. Back in Jerusalem, Leah stared at her computer screen, the mission files long archived, the folders closed. Her new assignment was entirely different, desk-bound, safe, sterile. No aliases. No field lies. No charm as weapon. Just intelligence briefings, data analysis, and strategy reports. It should have been easier. But it wasn't. Because inside the top drawer of her apartment desk sat a photo she could never bring herself to delete. A blurry, candid shot of Arya sipping coffee by the roadside. His face was half smiling, half watching the world with those thoughtful eyes. She didn't know why she kept it. But every time she tried to press delete, her finger paused, paralyzed by guilt and something even worse, longing. One rainy afternoon in Kalimantan, Arya collapsed in front of a neighbor's door. His body had been growing weaker for weeks, coughing fits, dizziness, sleepless nights. But he never told anyone. Why would he? Who would care? He was taken to a small government clinic, where doctors diagnosed him with malnutrition, chronic stress, and early signs of depression. He refused to stay, even after being advised to rest. Back in his rented room, now darker and damper than ever, Arya stared at the ceiling, watching raindrops crawl through a crack. He wasn't suicidal. He wasn't angry. He just didn't feel real anymore. Leah, meanwhile, continued her work, going through reports like a ghost in a machine. Her colleagues admired her precision, her calm, her discipline. No one saw the fatigue behind her eyes. One evening, while training new recruits, a senior agent approached her. "You failed once," he said, not unkindly. "Not because you didn't get the data, but because you cared." Leah didn't deny it. "And I still do." The man studied her. "Then write it down. Not for them. For you." That night she sat at her desk, opened a blank document, and typed, "Arya, if you're reading this, and I know the chances are small, I want you to know that I came to destroy you, but ended up being destroyed. You gave without asking. You believed without proof. And I gave you everything fake, except my feelings. I'm sorry I never dared to love you honestly." She didn't print it. She didn't send it. But she folded it, placed it in the same jacket pocket she had worn the day she saw him last, as if, somehow, someday, she might return. In Kalimantan, the regional Pertamina office received a transfer request from Arya, but not for another promotion. For exit. He wrote simply, "I am no longer able to perform my duties with the same energy or focus. I respectfully resign." The resignation was accepted without protest. No questions. No fanfare. Just a polite, "Thank you for your service" email. Arya left quietly, disappearing into a remote village deep in East Kalimantan. There, signal was weak, electricity unstable, and no one asked about the past. He built wells, helped repair bamboo homes, and taught children how to read. They called him Mr. Arya, and that was enough. He never spoke of Jakarta. Never spoke of the woman. But each night, when everyone else was asleep, he'd sit on a woven mat, look up at the stars, and whisper one name in his prayer. Leah. Years passed. Leah, now stationed at the Israeli embassy in Europe, rarely returned to the field. Her life was structured: diplomatic meetings, policy briefings, international conferences. She had the life she had trained for. But not the peace she once imagined would come with it. Every now and then, when the noise around her stopped, she'd pull open the drawer, take out Arya's photo, and stare at it like it was the last piece of a truth she couldn't get back. She never married. Never fell in love again. Because everything after Arya felt rehearsed. Measured. Engineered. And what she had felt for him, even if it began with lies, had turned into the most real thing in her entire life. One morning at Pertamina's Jakarta office, a young employee received a letter from a remote village requesting agricultural tools. It was signed, Field Coordinator, Arya Setiawan. The name stunned him. He searched the system. No recent record. Just archived data. Arya had vanished from the map. But he was still alive. Still working. Still giving. They didn't reply to the letter. Not yet. But someone forwarded a copy to an old analyst at the Israeli embassy in Berlin. When Leah saw the scanned signature, she didn't cry. She just folded the paper slowly and placed it in her folder beside her untouched resignation letter. And whispered to herself, "He's alive!" The sun blazed softly over the quiet village in East Kalimantan, casting long shadows across the muddy footpaths and the cracked walls of wooden houses. Children laughed in the distance, splashing water in a narrow stream, while Arya Setiawan slowly swept dry leaves from the front of the local learning hut. His shoulders slouched a little more than before. His back curved ever so slightly. But his hands moved with quiet steadiness, the same hands that once drafted energy policy reports, the same hands that once handed coffee to a woman he'd never forget. That morning felt no different than any other. Until a motorbike arrived from town. A teenage boy got off and handed Arya a sealed envelope. "Someone from Jakarta sent this," the boy said, smiling curiously. "Said it's for you?" Arya took the envelope wordlessly, fingers lingering on the edges. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar. Neat. Careful. Formal. Inside, there was a printed letter. It was from Pertamina HQ. An invitation, a reunion of past staff members who had served the company with distinction. A recognition event for their contributions. A gentle nod from a world Arya no longer belonged to. He folded the letter and placed it under his mattress. He didn't plan to attend. He didn't plan to reply. But he didn't throw it away either. Because somewhere beneath the layers of his pain, a part of him still needed to be remembered. Thousands of miles away, in Berlin, Leah Dehan stared at her screen. She hadn't touched her official intelligence dashboard in months. Her career had shifted. She was now a diplomatic liaison, still part of the system, but far from the field. Far from chaos. Far from Arya. And yet, when she received a forwarded internal memo about a name spotted in Kalimantan, her hands began to shake. Arya Setiawan. She didn't hesitate. She packed one bag, applied for diplomatic leave, and booked a flight to Jakarta. She didn't tell anyone, not even her supervisor. This trip wasn't sanctioned. It wasn't part of her role. It was personal. She landed under a cloudy sky, carrying only essentials, and one folded letter she had written years ago but never dared to send. 2 days later, Leah stepped onto a muddy road in a village so quiet that even the trees seemed to whisper. A kind woman at the local warung pointed her toward the edge of the riverbank, where a thin man was fixing bamboo fencing. Leah walked slowly. When Arya finally turned and saw her, he didn't move. He just blinked. "Leah," he said, the name barely escaping his lips like a forgotten hymn. She nodded. "I was just passing through." He didn't respond. His eyes studied her face, as if trying to figure out whether she was real or a memory his loneliness had invented. "I didn't come to apologize," she said after a long silence. "I know it's too late." Arya looked away, his expression unreadable. "Then why did you come?" Leah took a deep breath, pulled the old envelope from her pocket, and placed it gently on a wooden bench nearby. "Just this," she said. "If you want to read it, read it. If not, let the wind take it." Arya didn't touch the letter. Instead, he asked quietly, "What did you ever really get from me?" Lee's eyes shimmered. "Nothing," she whispered. "And that's what destroyed me." They sat together under the guava tree for nearly 2 hours. Not saying much. Not looking at each other too long. Just breathing the same air, in the same silence, one last time. As the sun began to dip, Leah stood up. "I should go," she said. Arya still didn't look at her. "I don't know what my life will be after this." She nodded. "I don't either. But at least now, I know where you are." Then, without a hug, without a goodbye kiss, she walked away, disappearing down the path like she had all those years ago. Arya sat still for a long time. Finally, he picked up the letter. He didn't open it. He didn't burn it. He slid it under the same rock where he'd hidden her first letter. And whispered, "Let time decide." Months passed. Leah returned to Europe. To her desk. Her daily files. Her smart suits. Her quiet sadness. No one knew where she'd been. No one asked? But inside her drawer, she still kept a printed copy of the letter she left in Arya's village, the letter she had written in trembling hands years ago. Sometimes she'd reread it, word for word. "You were never a target. You were the lesson I wasn't ready for." And every time she read it, she cried. Not because she wanted him back, but because she knew he'd never come back, to the world, to love, or to her. Meanwhile, Arya kept living in silence. He planted vegetables, cleaned irrigation channels, taught children basic math. The villagers adored him. He smiled at them. But his heart remained hollow, a quiet, constant ache. He never married. Never tried to explain. But every night, before sleeping, he'd whisper her name in prayer. Leah. Not with anger. Not with longing. Just as a man who had once given everything, and now only remembered. Years later, when Arya passed away peacefully in his sleep, the village buried him beneath the guava tree. There was no family. No headlines. No ceremony. Just a group of children who cried, and a folded letter found beneath a nearby rock, untouched, unread, aged by time and rain. The ink had faded. But the pain remained preserved. Some say Leah never recovered from what happened. That she left her job, moved to a quiet coastal town in Portugal, and lived alone by the sea. That she stopped checking the news. That she never looked up Kalimantan again. But that in her final years, every sunset she'd sit with a glass of tea and whisper to the waves. "I loved you, too late."